health savings accounts get the flush of Obamacare. And no, you will not be able to take your money out and finance your kids' education. There'll be a 20% hickey that you'll have to forego, but that's from the feds if you do so. So health savings accounts are sliding into a thing of the past somewhere around 2014. Secondly, if I was looking for specific things to deal with the point that Sharon raised, I would go to the Manhattan Institute, because they have a Canadian doctor on staff and they've done a lot of work on the mechanics of what works and what doesn't. I do know that the Competitive Enterprise Institute, to some degree, has addressed the issue of things like Cato and Heritage. They pay big bucks to have PhDs that work these things out. But I would suggest Sharon to get a hold of or just do some research at the Manhattan Institute.
I think that's really good advice. Yes.
You talked about the 11th Amendment. The 11th Amendment talks about the judicial power of the United States and not about what Congress does. Can you explain to me why the 11th, what that has to do with?
Yes. Basically, the court over the years has interpreted the 11th Amendment essentially to constrain all federal government power. And to prevent direct, and they usually pair it with the 10th Amendment in doing this. Basically, to constrain the power of the federal government to directly, and I hate to use the jargon, commandeer the institution of the state, and for the states to become mere functionaries of the federal government, to use language from the opinions. So when you look at the language of the 11th Amendment, you'd be surprised that that's how the precedents have come out, but they've been very, very robust. So what you look for is direct regulation requiring states to do something. And in the case of Arizona, as an example, a few years ago, we used tobacco fund money to go above and beyond the requirements of Medicaid for little kids. And now we can't afford it. Under Obamacare, there is now a requirement that any existing programs can't be cut, can't be reduced. And that would be something that I would argue would be in violation of the precedents interpreting that amendment.
How do you get around the basic problem of horses out of the barn? Because in a lot of cases...
Of what? I'm sorry?
The horse being out of the barn, because in a lot of cases, haven't we reached a point where the states are essentially functionaries of the federal government? And well, the court has been that way for a long time, and what's going on with it?
You're absolutely right. The states themselves go along with it. They get bribed to do something. But these principles and these precedents are very, very recent vintage. And I think this particular U.S. Supreme Court is very robust in applying them when the states stand up for themselves, which isn't always the case. But one thing about the horse being out of the barn, I think one of the possible mistakes, miscalculations that Congress made in passing Obamacare is that most of the provisions of Obamacare are delayed in their implementation. And the reason for that is they know it's going to just add massively to the deficit, so they didn't want to do it right away. But that makes it vulnerable because people are not already enrolled in the programs and dependent on the programs. And that gives us a few years to get rid of this thing without people suffering for our getting rid of it.
I'm Dr. Kevin Green in
Doctor.
By federal government forcing the doctors to accept Medicare and Medicaid, have you ever challenged the kind of
The question was challenging the Medicare and Medicaid requirements on doctors under slavery, the 13th Amendment. No, I have not done that, and I have to say that I am new to the healthcare issue. When you talk about a horse being out of the barn, Medicare and Medicaid, I consider to be issues that were probably too late to the party, so to speak. However, I have litigated 13th Amendment, a 13th Amendment case. I actually served in the Reagan administration Justice Department, and we actually prosecuted a cult for human slavery. And though the 13th Amendment uses the term involuntary servitude, the courts have incredibly narrowly interpreted that. It was used, for example, during the draft, to challenge the draft during the Vietnam War, and essentially the court has made involuntary servitude a redundancy of slavery. It literally has to be, and I know there are probably doctors who would say, well, it really is, but it really does have to be literally a condition in which you are subservient to a human master who literally owns your life. So unfortunately, I don't think that precedent is available to us here, or that provision is available to us here. Yeah.
I'm new to the political process. I'm a candidate, Ralph Perez, I'm a candidate for state representative in District 16. One of the issues kind of goes back to the previous question. What concerns me is that we've got here in Idaho two Idaho constitutional requirements. One, we balance our budget. Two, we need to provide for a statewide education system for our children. In the last legislature, they made some real uncomfortable cuts in education. Now we've got a federal government, in effect, prioritizing our state budget with their unfunded Medicaid mandates. $1 goes to Medicaid, kids take a back seat. And they say they paid for it, but we haven't paid for it. So I'm really concerned that we have allowed the federal government to basically prioritize our state budget. Is that a part of our lawsuit?
Ralph, I so appreciate that question. First of all, a quick diversion. I want to thank you for running. And I don't know whether it's the same here in Idaho as it is back in Arizona. I suspect it is. There are more people running, especially as Republicans, for every office than ever at any other point in history. And there are people who had not planned to run for office, business people, doctors, and so forth. My wife is among them. She's running for the state legislature in Arizona. Whenever I introduce her as the one politician I hope to never have to sue. But she knows I might. But in any event, Ralph, that is the conundrum that will be presented in our lawsuit in Arizona. That is the novel theory that we are pushing. Essentially, that the federal government is forcing legislators to make Hobson's choices, and essentially, it should be a state legislator's complete prerogative under the confines of the Idaho Constitution, not under the confines of the U.S. Congress, to make legislative judgments in the best interests of the people of Idaho. So we are, I would say, we are probably 3 or 4 weeks away from filing. This is pioneering. This is trailblazing. This theory has only been tried in one other lawsuit. It was successful, and then the case became moot because Congress repealed the law that was essentially being challenged. So this is really virgin territory for us, but it sounds like it fits your situation and your future colleague's situation to a T. So I would say we would share that with you. It's possible grounds for a different lawsuit. We are representing individual legislators rather than the state of Arizona and that particular theory. But I appreciate your articulating that. 2 months ago, we didn't even have this theory, and it's not in the other lawsuits, but it may be something worth exploring for a separate lawsuit. I know everyone hates litigators, and most people hate lawyers for justifiable reasons.